You ready, guys? Kick off. Two gentlemen need no introduction from me. They're very well known. Very interesting to have Claudio and to have Dominic. One from obviously very well known, respected operator, another from the regulator. And I'm hoping that their two divergent opinions will give us a bit of colour on the regulatory problems, compliance problems that we've had. Now, Simon and a number of the other contributors have touched on the enforcement actions that have been undertaken against particularly Maltese operators by, in particular, the British regulator. As you all know, at one point the British regulator had no fewer than 17 licensees from the island going through a process of regulatory enforcement. Regulatory enforcement can range from informal communication all the way through to a full-blown license review. One of the consequences of a license review can be the revocation of a license or the suspension of a license. Failing that, a substantial fine. The fines, as we've seen, have been coming into the millions of sterling. I think it's true to say that there are more to come, and it's true to say that they're probably getting bigger. And disturbingly, the British regulator is now looking at the concept of affordability as one of the metrics that it takes into account in assessing these fines. So they're even giving up on the idea of looking at what you've made and looking at the money or the profit you may have made from whatever wrongdoing it might be, and they're now simply looking at what the business can afford. And Simon touched on it earlier, and we've had a number of these cases, and the hope, I think, on the part of the regulator, I think also it's true to say the hope in the industry, is that these enforcement actions have really been a shot across the bows for an industry that's been meteorically successful, that has expanded at an exponential rate. But perhaps if we were to look at ourselves and be honest, we might say that in that sort of explosive process over the last 10 years, corners may have been cut. So I suppose the first question for Claudio and the first question for Dominic really is really a philosophical one, a general one, really whether the feeling and the spirit and the philosophy of doing business here on the island has changed, and whether the businesses now are in a mood, are in a sort of ethical and conceptual position, Claudio, whereby they genuinely do understand that compliance is something that they have to get right. Otherwise, this is going to be a big problem for potentially their survival, certainly their profitability.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. So, I mean, given the eye-watering sanctions that have been handed out to a number of operators, and as you've rightly said, it seems to have been indicated that 17 of those had actually been operators which were operating out of Malta. I think it's very difficult, and it would be almost shocking that any C-level group within a company would turn a blind eye to the public statements that are being issued by the Gambling Commission. So I'd be very, very surprised that if social responsibility, responsible gaming, AML and CSR initiatives in general have not been on the agenda at the top of that list of the major gaming operators currently. Obviously, we can debate whether there's proportionality being implemented behind the sanctions that are being handed out, but definitely the impact is definitely felt, and perhaps that is also due to the magnitude of the fines that are being issued. Besides that, also now investors and shareholders also have a very profound interest in what we are doing, what the boards and the C-level group thinks about social responsibility, and they are also paying a lot more attention to that, which certainly brings the message home that we need to do something about it and we need to act fast. And certainly the Gambling Commission has done a very good job at reminding us that we need to do things. Yeah. And I mean, Dominic, from your point of view and the point of view of the MGA,
life goes on, you're going to have, with the influx of business from Gibraltar, the influx of the potential regulation of further European markets, you're going to have more operators on your plate, you're going to have more responsibility on your plate before long. And when, the MGA and Heathcliff, you talk about raising the bar, what do you have in mind? You're the premier licensing hub now, you're the premier jurisdictional hub. I mean, what's the vision from you as an enforcement officer of what you want to see from your customers, as it were, going forward?
Well, yes. First of all, one has to bear in mind also that gaming operators from this year, they have more responsibilities than the previous years, because now they are as well subject persons. So every operator must keep in mind that if we take the local legislation, which is quite a bit different from the UK, where the issue, for instance, of anti-money laundering is split between two authorities. The Malta Gaming Authority, its main role is to supervise and examine the operators that they are adhering with their AML obligations. Whereas, as for sanctioning, if an operator is in breach, the administrative fine and the breach are issued by the FIU. So they are the sanctioning body to issue the administrative fines. This doesn't mean that as an authority, we cannot as well, in addition to that fine, cancel or suspend the license. So from a regulator, what I see it this way, that subject persons have the role to prevent one of the most serious organized crimes. So if a person is going to launder money, according to Maltese law, that is punishable by 18 years imprisonment. So subject person has this responsibility to prevent that crime from happening.
Yeah.
And in view of this, in view of the seriousness of this crime and the obligations, if we take our legislation as well, yes, I understand that maybe the UKGC fines sound quite astronomical, but if they are obviously proportionate or not, that's up to the UKGC to decide that. And also probably, I don't know, but maybe the operators can challenge those type of fines. But if we take our legislation as well here in Malta, due to these strict obligations, strict responsibilities, our legislation also states that whoever is in breach of these obligations, the maximum fine is €1 million. So when the authority is faced with these kind of breaches, it will take into consideration the maximum fine and the result of that breach, what it could be.
Yeah.
That personnel, that persons, players, were able to launder their illicit proceeds. So one has to keep this in mind. And I think, and this year, the authorities, we started as a supervisor now, because legally now we are the supervising authority, which will do the examination. I think that it didn't drill down enough on gaming operators about these new obligations. And this has to start from board level.
Yes.
I mean, the risk appetite rests with the board, and also that the board will have this risk appetite that, listen, now we are facing new challenges, we are facing new obligations, and we have to enhance our compliance.
Yeah.
Honestly, so far we did 33 examinations. I know that the implementing procedures came into force in July, so now there's more maybe clarity of how operators have to operate and practice. But as for compliance nature, I think it's more a change of culture.
Yes. So, I mean, and that's an interesting conclusion to that point, Dominic, because, of course, one of the changes that one would expect to see in response to this is, of course, a governance change, a cultural change. I mean, you're looking at businesses, and as I say, they've expanded very rapidly. Profit and customer acquisition is maximized. And so, you, Claudio, as a responsible operator, and you, Dominic, as a regulator, do you expect to see, for example, compliance operators and general counsel put on the board? These people are present at board meetings. Compliance and customer interaction, social responsibility is an agenda on board meetings. So do you expect to see the culture and as well as the culture, but the structure of the business is changing to empower the people inside the business who are going to achieve compliance?
Yes, sure enough. In fact, that's why there's this interesting person within the operation, which is called the Money Laundering Reporting Officer. And that's why the MLRO, according to the implementing procedure, should be independent, should work independently. And the structure of the MLRO is like twofold, that he will deliver to the board the risk of AML. And the risk appetite of the board, then he has to push it down towards all maybe the officers of the company. Obviously, not every officer is an AML officer within that operator,
sure.
but the culture should be enhanced in all the operation. For instance, if we take us, the authority, okay, we created an AML team, an AML department, which will focus on these examinations. However, throughout the authority, we give training to change the culture of all the officers.
Yeah.
And in fact, maybe the first change is also in our due diligence process, in our onboarding process. For instance, whereas in the past maybe we focus more on the criminal probity of the UBOs, of the applicants, now we are going to focus as well on the structure.
On the processes,
Is this AML-oriented? What policies and procedures are in place? What risk appetite there is in place? Are there risk documents, customer acceptance policy? So we are going to look to all this procedure. And also, for the first time, apart from the checks on the money laundering reporting officer regarding criminal probity and the stuff, we are going to introduce also an interview. So the new MLROs will be interviewed, nothing exceptionally, it's not a grilling or something like that, but at least that they are aware of the obligations of an MLRO, also that they are aware of what type of products, the markets of the company, where the risks are coming from, or maybe they will face, so that we'll know that the MLRO also has a knowledge about the operation of the operator, of the gaming operator.
Yeah.
I think also one thing that we need to keep in mind is that now we're seeing a shift in the way regulation is sort of organized. Whereas in the past, perhaps under the remote gaming regulations in Malta, we're used to a bit of a prescriptive regime. And perhaps local operators were used to a regime whereby the law or the regulations actually told you at what point you need to conduct certain checks, a certain due diligence, and what you would need to request. And if the authorities would actually come to audit you, you could have had a bit of an expectation and anticipation of what they would be looking for. I think with the new regulations, and it sort of also converges with regulation that's being passed in other countries as well as the UK, it's more an outcome-based approach. It's more objective-driven.
Yeah.
Whereby the regulators are telling us, this is what you need to do. You need to make sure that you are preventing money laundering and minimizing harm caused by your product. The way you do it is up to you, as long as it's transparent and you are accountable for it. Yeah. So I think the compliance teams and even the boards need to realize that there is no one magic formula that will work for the companies. It's just a structure of having your own strategy and making sure that your strategy is achieving the objective and the outcome is exactly what the regulators are expecting.
And one of the very noticeable things, Dominic, about the British enforcement and the fines is that all of the licensees who've suffered these enforcement actions, they have been in possession of adequate data. They've been in possession of the data and the knowledge that they needed in order to implement the processes and implement the procedures. And very often, with the best intention, the processes or the procedures themselves internally fell down. It might be as simple as some guy going on holiday, or someone fails to keep a file note, or the records weren't there. So when you're looking at people, are you looking at the robustness? Do you actually road test or stress test? You're looking at the robustness, not only that they know what they're doing, but that these processes can actually work?
Yes, in fact, as part of the examination will not start on site. The examination will start off-site, where we will look all through the documentation, if there's documentation in place, and then we go on site. What is lacking, in my opinion, as well, is that there is lack of documentation. If there's a policy and procedure, maybe there is a person who knows it, but it's nowhere written. Yes. So if that person leaves, no one knows what he's going to do.
Sure.
And that's, is quite at fault, because it doesn't mean that only the MLRO should be knowledgeable, but even the people, even the front officers, should know what the policy is, what the procedures are. And I think that is still lacking, the lack of documentation. As well, in fact, to see about the robustness of the whole operation, that's why when we are on site, we take a number of samples. Okay, sometimes an examination, nowadays, it takes us about 2 or 3 days to perform a whole examination. Maybe in the future, it will be longer. But we take that amount of samples as well, so that we will check if the system is robust enough or not.
Sure.
So if, for instance, if we take 10 samples and we see that everything is okay, that is fine. If we see that out of that 10 samples that we took, 5 are not as good, then we take a broader sample.
And by samples, Dominic, what you're looking at, for example, what? You're looking at an instance of irresponsible gaming, or you're looking at an instance or something where there should have been an interaction with the customer? Or you're looking at some kind of test case where something bad has happened to the business and you're looking at the way it responds?
Yes. For instance, according to the policy, before a PEP is onboarding, and there is a requirement that there must be a management approval.
Sure.
We are going to check on site. But how is the process? So that the management approve that PEP. What is the process? And we see some samples of PEPs, and we have to see as well where is that management approval, how it is onboarding. For instance, regarding players coming from high-risk jurisdiction. On the policy and procedure, there will be that they will perform enhanced due diligence. But what kind of enhanced due diligence?
Yes.
So we see from those samples if the policy that is written is actually being operated in place. Or sometimes even vice versa. Sometimes we see that the process is in place, but nowhere is documented. So if those persons will leave tomorrow, the operator will not have anything to show.
Sure.
About those policies.
Sure. If I can come to you, Claudio. I mean, you look at the statements and you look at what the businesses need to do. There's the internal management of risk, the internal processes, the procedure. Also, there is a changing attitude to the external risk factors, and I'm thinking about things like affiliate relationships. I'm thinking about things like VIP programs, and I'm thinking about various, the advertising that businesses undertake. There's a whole sort of matrix of risk out there. For example, Sky Bet, you'll have seen, just terminated its affiliate program because it wasn't confident it could ensure compliance across the affiliates. And we as a law firm have seen many people coming and saying, look, we need robust agreements with the affiliates. I mean, from your viewpoint, Claudio, how are you looking at all of that external risk? The affiliates, who they're putting through to you, the tension created when a business relies on VIP income streams, the internal tension that creates?
Yeah. To start off with the VIPs, I think if a business nowadays is remaining afloat from its revenues generated from VIPs, unfortunately, I do personally believe that the business is running a risk of its revenues not being completely sustainable. There's profound interest by the regulators into VIPs. And the regulatory standard and expectation, understandably, is much higher in respect to VIPs. So I believe that there has to be some form of onboarding procedures in place for VIPs, so that before a player is actually invited to the VIP program, the operator actually ensures that that person is not a compulsive gambler, and that the only reason why that person has been invited to the VIP program is not only based on spend. But actually, one should look deeper and understand that that person actually wants to be part of the VIP program, that person affords his gambling spend. And we also sit on, as you've mentioned before, on a lot of data. So we need to also make use of data-driven technology to be able to analyze patterns and behaviors and to be able to respond to changing patterns and behaviors in as near real time as possible, to make sure that if we need to interact or intervene, we do it in a manner which is timely, and also we do it in a manner which is effective. Because unfortunately, some old systems would send an email to a customer when a customer is online, and that's not really effective, because obviously if a customer is playing on his phone, you would want some kind of pop-up that disrupts the activity. And we know that the regulators, especially we've heard this straight off the horse's mouth in the UK, where they said that the products themselves need to be socially responsible and they need to offer these responsible gaming features in themselves. And it would be insufficient if you are using other methods just to comply with the regulations, seemingly, but if it is not really effective to players. So that's important on VIPs, but also in respect to affiliates, I think there in that respect, we are doing a lot more due diligence when it comes to affiliates. We've had to also upgrade our contracts. But obviously contracts are not always enough, because at times the sanctions that we might receive due to breaches done by the affiliates might far outweigh the assets that the affiliate might have to actually pay you and indemnify you.
The benefit that they're delivering.
Exactly. So what we are doing from my point of view is communicating very clear guidelines to the affiliates, and besides that, we've also developed our proprietary compliance tool, which actually can scrape the internet and see where our brands are mentioned. And it can notify and alert us when our content is perhaps on certain sites which might be appealing to children, certain other sites that we don't want to have any association with. So we are investing a lot more nowadays in automation, because I think automation is key to delivering compliance.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because of course, in a way, you could take a step back and you could look at the whole problem. You could look at the whole issue that we've had, and you could almost say that it was a people issue. And some of the other speakers, some of the other delegates earlier have talked about, the ability to track the right people in the island. I mean, do you think it's true to say that in the past, the compliance, the regulatory, the money laundering people were perhaps in the businesses regarded as a bit second class?
I think they were siloed rather than second class. I think they were placed, they were perceived as a back office function, and I don't think they were properly integrated with another teams. I think for compliance to be effective, it needs to function in the different business units. There needs to be the central compliance team as a supporting function, but I believe it's extremely important that there's a compliance officer within the marketing team, within the affiliate team, and within all the customer support, etc., etc. I think that's the only way that compliance can really be effective. I think in the past, compliance was more that kind of role, dealing with regulators, making sure that the content on the website is safe. Now the role of compliance has really been upgraded, and we are now entrusted with a lot more in the company.
Sure. Well, the red light down there is flashing at me, so we've come to the end. Dominic, we're going to end with you very, very quickly. A proper kind of TV soundbite from you, please. Are you happy that Malta is the premier licensing hub going forward? Are you happy when you get up in the morning, you go to work, and you put your tie on, you go to work? Are you happy that you're going to have the highest, that you're also going to have the highest standards as well as the most populous licensing jurisdiction?
Yes, in fact, that is a challenge, the primary challenge for the authority. As I started before, subject persons have new obligations, but also the authority has these new obligations and these responsibilities, where as an authority we have to outreach more with the industry, where we have to guide them more. And in fact, maybe next year, we will look at the common findings that we found, and we will or issue guidelines or provide a seminar. Because, yes, I will be happy when, as an authority, we would make our utmost to educate the industry and to be clear more about their responsibilities and their obligations.
Sure, brilliant. Well, thank you very much to Dominic and Claudio. Very interesting, two different perspectives from the regulator, from an operator. Thank you, both of them, for subjecting themselves to the interview, to the armchair. And please show your appreciation of Dominic and Claudio.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.